Before Predator 2, and before the video game that shares the same title, Dark Horse published Predator: Concrete Jungle, the original sequel to the 1987 classic. Written by Mark Verheiden and penciled by Chris Warner. If you know me, you know I'm a big Arnold Schwarzenegger fan, and the original Predator is one of my all-time favorite movies. And while Predator 2 is not as good as its predecessor, I still think it's a really fun movie in its own right. But today, we're talking about the one that did it first. Predator: Concrete Jungle was published in 1989, 2 years after the first movie, and 1 year before the official sequel. This is kind of fascinating to me. Predator is such an iconic and recognizable movie franchise, with multiple sequels, spin-offs, video games, and tons of merchandise. And buried in all that history is this little comic book that came before the slew of Predator-related media. So stick around, because today we're going to be going through the story of Predator: Concrete Jungle, differences between it and Predator 2, and which one is the better sequel. Now I know comics and movies are two totally different forms of media, and you can't really compare the two, but I'm going to do it anyway. There is a blazing heat wave going through the violent streets of New York City. Domestic violence reaches gruesome levels, and gang wars are rampant. Thrown into the middle of these messes are Detective Raish and Detective Schaefer, big brother to the hero of the original movie, Alan Dutch Schaefer. Jumping into this comic book, not knowing anything about it, this was an awesome surprise. Detective John Schaefer bears a striking resemblance to his younger brother. I like to imagine that, hypothetically, had this character made it to the movies, he would just be played by Arnold again, just with his hair dyed blonde. Or I could even see Dolph Lundgren playing him. Undoubtedly, this is the biggest factor in differentiating Predator: Concrete Jungle and Predator 2. Having a protagonist with strong ties to Dutch made me all the more excited to see this story through. It's interesting in retrospect when you take into account that Predator movies are really self-contained. They don't directly follow up previous movies. The most you'll get is a throwaway line referencing the mission in Central America, or someone will mention the sole survivor of the elite team.
87 Guatemala. A spec ops team went into the jungle. High end. 6 men plus a CIA liaison. Only one made it out.
Elsewhere in a rundown building, there are gangs negotiating a peace treaty of sorts. The police force has been coming down hard on all of them, and if they don't come to an agreement, they'll be doing the Colombian gang a favor, taking each other out over petty turf wars, and leaving everything up for grabs. Meat-headed gang leader Carr has no interest in shaking hands with these suits. He'd rather do things the old-fashioned way, and instigates a fight. But no matter, a third party interrupts their meeting, and it's not long before the two rival gangs join hands and try to take out whatever the hell just slaughtered 2 of their men. Raish and Schaefer arrive and are treated to a gruesome scene that some of us are all too familiar with. Skinned corpses hang from the ceiling. Bodies litter the floor. It is a massacre. Somehow Carr was left alive and ambushes the 2 partners, believing cops were responsible for this. He manages to escape after a short shootout. Moments later, the big boss Captain Combs shows up, taking control of the scene and ordering Raish and Schaefer to stay out of this investigation. This is bigger than all of them. The 2 know he's hiding something. The following day, a similar scene is discovered. This time, big-time hotshots take the heat. Stockbrokers, lawyers, vice presidents. Coincidentally, they were all armed to the teeth. Combs catches Raish and Schaefer sticking their noses where they don't belong again, and chews their asses out. But a familiar face saves them from the lecture. General Phillips, the officer who recruited Dutch and his team in the original movie. He advises Schaefer to stay out of this one. This loose killer plays for keeps. Schaefer is not going to give that easy. He and Raish pull up to the scene where the hunter got his first kills with the 2 gang members. And finally, Schaefer gets to meet what he's up against. He's no match for the Predator. Schaefer is tossed around the room like a play doll, but he's able to get a hit in. He knocks the Predator's mask off, revealing the monster's handsome mug. Schaefer takes a nasty spill, but leaves the fight with a souvenir. Two, actually. The Predator's mask, and some sort of tag on his neck. The Predator is keeping track of him as if he were a shark in the wild. If he wasn't before, Schaefer is honed in on this animal now. This thing is dangerous, and it's somehow connected to his missing brother. This is personal. He tries to get more information out of his captain, Combs, but it goes nowhere. If he wants to find out more about the Predator, he needs to take a trip to Colombia, the location of Dutch's last mission. I know I've mainly been focusing on the character of Schaefer, but I don't mean to leave his partner Raish in his shadow. Although admittedly, it is kinda hard to avoid getting caught in this guy's shadow. He's pretty big. Anyway, Raish is a pretty cool character too, and a badass in his own right. To be honest, I'd say he's actually a more interesting character than Schaefer. While Schaefer is your typical muscle-bound, one-line spewing macho action hero, Raish is more of the everyman. He's tired, out of shape, and he's just looking forward to retirement. And even though he'd rather not get intertwined with cases that are out of his league, he has a strong devotion to his job, and he'll always have his partner's back, no matter what. Now in Colombia, Schaefer hires a local to guide him to the place his brother and his team were last seen. After a long trek through the jungle, they come across the crater left by the Predator's self-destruct device after losing a grueling battle against Dutch. History is about to repeat itself when the same Predator Schaefer went up against in New York City tracks him down. Once again, it's another battle against a Schaefer and a Yautja in the jungles of Colombia. Schaefer lives up to his namesake, and another one of these ugly motherfuckers hits the ground. Turns out the guide Schaefer hired is an undercover agent sent by General Phillips. Schaefer was not meant to come back alive. Back in New York City, Raish is stressing over the current circumstances. People are being slaughtered, his partner is missing, and he's got some weird helmet dropped by the killer. So he does what any of us would do. He tries it on. Surprise, surprise. There's been a goddamn fleet of alien ships hovering the Big Apple this whole time. This reveal shook me to my core. It's rare that a panel in a comic book evokes the same feeling I get during a jump scare in a movie. And it's really impressive when artists and writers pull this off. So I really have to commend them here. I mean, imagine the gravity of the situation. One predator. One predator! It's trouble enough. Imagine a goddamn army of these assholes. Of course, Raish wastes no time in getting this information to his superiors, but Combs has had it with this guy. Raish and his partner have been interfering with this investigation long enough, and Combs books him for withholding evidence, that being the Predator's mask. Back in Colombia, Schaefer gets ambushed by a gang led by an old thug he used to deal with in New York. Schaefer once threw this guy off a 3-story building, so I guess he's holding a grudge. Tied up to a chair, seconds away from torture, Schaefer improvises an escape, and this hostage situation quickly turns into an all-out war when some uninvited guests show up. You guessed it, more Yautjas. Am I pronouncing that right? Yautja? Yautja? I gotta look it up.
We have the one I've used for a long time, Yautja. Now you can also say Yaja, where the letter J is pronounced like a letter Y and the letter T is silent. There's also Jatja, where the letter U is silent. And then we have Yatja and also Yautja. And there's even 2 other pronunciations of this word that are very different from the spelling. For example,
forget I asked. In the middle of this big scuffle, General Phillips swoops in with the cavalry, and he and Schaefer get to the chopper. What? The helicopter. They ran to get on the... What do you want? I don't understand. Raish makes his own escape from the feds and steals some artillery from the impound. On their way back to the States, Phillips gives Schaefer the lowdown on the dreadlocked Martians. They seem to like the heat and have a grievance against the Schaefer boys. I guess they're a bunch of sore losers. Phillips was trying to settle this as cleanly as possible and planned to hand Schaefer over to the Predators on a silver platter. Schaefer doesn't take it lightly. The 2 partners are reunited and preparing for the fight of their lives. But if they're gonna stand the chance, they're gonna need some backup. Desperate times call for desperate measures. Schaefer goes to gang leader Carr to propose an alliance. Carr refuses at first, but is easily persuaded when a predator crashes their meeting and he sees what he'll be up against. The cowboys are round up and ready to go to war against the aliens. Hell reigns upon the city streets. Cops, gang members, soldiers, everyone is on the chopping block. They don't stand a chance against the Predator's weapons and their cloaking technology. But then Schaefer remembers something from when he and Carr were jumped by one of these pussy-faced motherfuckers. Water. Water interferes with their cloaking tech and will even the odds a bit. Luckily, it starts raining, but at this point, it is nothing but chaos. No order to this fight. The Predators back off, and one of them lets out a haunting laugh. They retreat, but not out of fear or defeat. The Predators could have wiped out the entire city without breaking a sweat. There was no sport in the battle anymore. Things had gotten out of hand, unruly. So they leave the planet. Maybe they'll be back someday, finish what they started. As long as there's a Schaefer out there, they'll have someone to hunt. And that's Predator Concrete Jungle. Now that we have a decent breakdown of the story, let's compare it to Predator 2 and point out some of the major differences and similarities. Starting with the most obvious. Both movies take place in a bustling city during a disgusting heat wave and raging gang violence. This was the most prominent influence Concrete Jungle had on Predator 2. You even have smaller scenes like the shootout in the subway car showing up in the movie. But we do return to the dense jungles of Colombia in the comic. Seeing the aftermath of Dutch's and the Predator's fight was really cool. Next up is our action heroes. Okay, so having what essentially is Arnold again as the protagonist is obvious and easy. From what I understand, they wanted to do just that for the movie, but Arnie wasn't on board. So we kinda get to see what that might have been like with this comic book. But Detective Schaefer just doesn't bring the same charisma Arnie brings to Dutch. Obviously, that's easier to do in a movie with an actor, but at the same time, I found Rage to be really likable and funny. And I'm glad that he gets just as much screen time, page time, as Schaefer, stacked up against Detective Mike Harrigan, portrayed by Danny Glover. I love this character. He's so loud and angry and hilarious, sweaty all the time. I gotta go with Glover. He's so over the top and entertaining, especially since the most interesting part of Schaefer is the Dutch angle. See what I did? Dutch angle, like movies. You know, what happened to Dutch? Will he find Dutch? Arnie is a tough act to follow, and I think Glover brought enough to make Predator 2 his own. And I gotta mention Bill Paxton for good measure. He's just the most obnoxious cartoon character, and I love him. Rest in peace.
So I go in for my physical, right? And the doctor says, I need a semen, stool, and urine sample. I say, gee, doc, I'm in a big hurry. Can I just leave my underwear?
Another similarity is the involvement of a special agency tracking the Predator and sort of butting heads with our lead detective. This one I'm having some trouble with, because I think it's cool that Concrete Jungle brings back General Phillips from the first movie. But Predator 2 has Gary Busey. Who's Gary Busey? He's intense, he's wild, he's got a big smile. I love him and Glover busting each other's balls every time they're on screen together.
A fucking alien.
I'm gonna give this aspect to Concrete Jungle. You can chalk it up to fan service. You know, we already have Schaefer returning to the crater left in Colombia after the final battle between Dutch and the Predator. Phillips as a reoccurring character. But let's say you take Predator 2 as the movie that it is, but you replace Busey's Agent Keys with General Phillips. I think that's just the right amount of connective tissue to have between movies. He's a minor character, so it's not super fan servicey. Predator 2 would still have a lot going for itself, with original ideas and characters that don't retread the same ground. I think having a character that acts as a liaison between movies works well, which Concrete Jungle has. Okay, so the last comparison I want to make is the final battle. Both features a Predator spaceship. The main difference being that Predator 2 has one ship and Concrete Jungle has a shit ton. The idea of having a bunch of Predator ships hiding in plain sight right above the rooftops of New York City is awesome and scary as hell. but I didn't love the final battle. It was much more of a large-scale war. It was messy, all over the place, and the comic kind of acknowledges and criticizes itself in that regard. The Predators don't even finish the fight. They just piece on out of there. They say, screw this is stupid and not fun. To me, the Predator is about the one-on-one duel, the grueling battle of wits and endurance, proving you're the better warrior, which Predator 2 has that. I love that the fight goes from the rooftops down to the inside of the Predator ship, and we get our first good look into the Predator's culture when Harrigan wins. These other Yaoyas, wait, how's it go again? Yaoya? Jar Jar? Jellybean? They were there the whole time and didn't interfere with their fight. And they give Harrigan this old-timey pistol as a trophy, paying their respects to him as a worthy warrior. We really get to see what the Predators are about in this scene, and it is really cool. And of course, it goes without saying, the Xenomorph skull on the wall amongst the other trophies. Finally acknowledging this rivalry that feels like it's been with us before these movies were even a thing. This one goes to Predator 2. So now we're here. Time to pick a winner. Which one is the better Predator sequel? It's been a long, grueling battle, but only one can come out on top. And the winner is... Predator 2. I love both of these sequels, but Danny Glover's intensity and the closing scene in the ship expanding and building on the universe gives Predator 2 the slight edge. Regardless, I highly recommend you check out Concrete Jungle. It's a fun action romp that Predator 2 owes a lot to. And this isn't even the final chapter in Schaefer's and Raish's adventures. You've also got Predator Cold War and Predator Dark River. I haven't read those in a while, so I don't remember if they're as good as Concrete Jungle. But if that's something you'd like me to cover in a future video, let me know down in the comments. But as always, thanks for watching, and I'll see you guys next time.